March, 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 March.
March Madness!
And I just took a DNA test. Turns out it's March. And fishing time is finally here for a lot of us around the country. As March gets warmer, the fish start moving shallower, and shaking a minnow can be a thing of the past as long as you find the right areas. So in today's video, I want to break down the month of March by lure category type, explaining why so many of the lure categories actually work during this month of the year, but which ones you should focus on in your pond or lake this month. My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it.
Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all.
I can't believe what I just caught.
Yes!
Today's episode is brought to you by the Bass Forecast mobile app. More on them and how they can help you become a better angler during this month later on in the video. So I want to break down my lure recommendations based on lure category today. I will touch on the region, the location a little bit, but I really want to talk why I pick certain categories in the month of March. And this month, really for a lot of us in the country, is just a pick a month. You can pick whatever lures you want to fish, and as long as you're fishing in the right location where the bass actually are present, you're probably going to have a good, successful day. Not everywhere. We're going to talk about the northern region. Your weather probably lends itself to being colder on average, and so these lures are going to work more for April. Now, don't tune out now. This video is still going to be helpful for you, and you're probably going to forget to watch it later. So go ahead, break out the notepad, take some notes now, because these lures will really work for you guys here in about a month. But for the rest of us who live in the South, bass fishing is on. And if it's not yet, it is dang about to be. Now, before I talk about which lure categories are in for the month of March, I've got to talk about which ones are out for the month of March, and that is topwaters, deep diving crankbaits, and your deeper, slow moving soft plastics like football jigs, Carolina rigs, and the like. Big shaky heads, drop shots, that kind of stuff. That usually gets put away for, at least in my experience, most of the spring, if not all of it, leading up to the post spawn in the summertime. Unless you live in Florida, as you guys have talked about before, have extra weird weather, you can actually catch deep fish right now in Florida. The rest of the country, though, I would leave those lures out. But Tyler, which lures are in? You know what? I'm glad you asked. First, we're going to talk about my favorite lure category and why you should throw a ton of these right now, and that is reaction baits. Now, Tyler, you've been talking about reaction baits all winter long, haven't you? And yes, the answer is I have. I've been throwing a vibrating jig all winter. I've been throwing a crankbait all winter, and I've been catching a decent amount of fish. But I also live in Texas, where we have, yes, some cold days, and it's generally, at least North Texas, where I live now, a colder climate than where I grew up in Central South Texas and Austin. So the weather is totally different than where I grew up, but it's still warmer than Missouri or Iowa or, Pennsylvania. So for me and my fishing, these shallow type lures, especially in ponds, really work 12 months of the year. But especially during this month, you're gonna have a lot of fish move from their deeper areas they spent the winter, and if it's deep, maybe it's on the bottom or suspended. Either way, it's usually more than a cast length out from the bank. And even on a small pond like you see right here, the fish are still on the move throughout the day. And a bank that has a fish on one day may have 4 fish the next day, or has 4 one day, and then by the next day they are totally gone. So don't get the understanding that if YouTube anglers only talk about bass boat situations, so big reservoirs, that it doesn't apply to ponds. It does, because the bass are still moving. I see them on live scope. They are incredibly active this time of the year, and they may start deep in the morning, end up shallow in the afternoon, and a reaction bait, both deep fished and shallow, is a great way to intercept those fish. Now, the 4 main reaction baits I'm throwing in all ponds and lakes throughout the month of March is going to be 1, a vibrating jig, the usually 3/8 ounce Strike King Thunder Cricket. Then I've got the Strike King Hybrid Hunter, my favorite, especially shallow water grass and rock lure. If it's a little bit deeper for the Hybrid Hunter, I'll go with a square bill on lighter line. I love a shallow diving crankbait. And if it is just ultra shallow, you got snot grass and really snaggy stuff, I will go with a weedless swim bait like the I think it's a 5.5 or 5 3/4 inch Strike King Rage swimmer on a very lightweighted hook, 1/8 ounce at most. Now, I'm not saying that a lipless crankbait and a suspending jerkbait, both being hard baits that are, I'd say, in the reaction, the moving baits category, I'm not saying they can't work, especially for y'all who are north of Tennessee. These are still going to be incredibly beneficial staples in your tackle box. It's just, for me, the fish are going to be moving incredibly shallow where I live all throughout this month. And so am I going to have a jerkbait tied on in case I see a fish sitting off a break when I'm live scoping? Yes, although I still might throw a stinking minnow at him. For the most part, especially when I'm fishing in a small body of water, whether it's the 200 pond series or fishing out of my kayak, it's going to be one of these 4 reaction baits right here. And really the sneaky good one that catches a lot of big fish is the paddle tail swim bait, either a totally weedless one like this one is here, or a top hook or a treble hook on the bottom. Either way, a 4 to 7 inch paddle tail soft swim bait is a great way to catch truly some giant bass in the month of March. Now, the areas you want to focus on fishing all these lures here, really, I'm talking about reaction baits and the categories to come, are going to be on high percentage areas. So it could be a point, like you see here, leading into a spawning area, or as I talked about in a previous pre-spawn masterclass, a boat dock or a laydown tree, all leading into kind of spawning shallow flat situations. Those are the kind of things that you might not automatically understand the importance of on your body of water, but season after season, you'll start realizing, dang, I catch fish here every single March. Maybe that's actually an important location I had never thought of before. So open up your mind, use your eye scope to be looking for visual targets, especially in shallow water on transition areas from deep to ultra shallow. And those are areas especially to throw the weedless swim bait and the vibrating jig. And if you've got good, healthy grass on one of those transition areas, the hybrid hunter, and good chunk rock on one of those transition areas, the square bill. Again, all 4 of these are tied on in my boat, my kayak, or the bank, although I don't bring 4 rods, so they're at least in my tackle bag all throughout this month. And the good news is, if you want to learn how to fish each one of these lures individually, you can just search Tyler's Reel Fishing and then Chatterbait, Tyler's Reel Fishing Swim Bait, Tyler's Reel Fishing Crankbaits, or Hybrid Hunter. I've got instructional videos teaching you guys all these things, and I will leave some of my favorites linked down in the video description. Now, as far as color goes, I don't really focus a whole lot on being super specific with color. If I know they're feeding on a ton of bluegill, which yes, they do feed on bluegill even in the pre-spawn, it's not just a shad or a crawfish thing, I'll throw some bluegill colors. If it's a body of water where I know they don't have much bluegill, I will still throw mostly shad. And if I don't really know what they're eating, red is really hard to beat. At least for me, it's a confidence color during this time of the year. Is it because it angers fish? Who knows? Is it because the crawfish are red in some bodies of water? So I don't really have a scientific answer as to why red works. It's just, for me and my confidence patterns, it does. But one color I will ride or die with is the baby bass color of the Strike King Rage Swimmer. I don't know whether it's the pearl belly or the green pumpkin top on this thing that triggers fish, but I just think, especially in ponds and small bodies of water, especially around grass, this thing is a great kind of happy medium between a baitfish color and a bluegill or pumpkin seed color, and that's why I think this thing is so successful. And as always, I will have the exact lures I'm talking about and colors linked in the video description for you all to check out. And the way those links work is that you click one of them, you buy whatever you want on that website, Tackle Warehouse being the best tackle shopping website, and I get credit for your entire purchase. So it helps my channel continue to grow, and as this is my full-time job, I've got to make a living somehow. And doing that costs you absolutely nothing, so I'd really appreciate it. Now, as I talked about, Bass Forecast has been a faithful sponsor on this channel, and I love talking about Bass Forecast, especially during the springtime months, because as an app built around a weather algorithm just for bass fishing, not for trout, not for stripers, not for peacock bass, just largemouth, smallmouth, and spots, it is very tuned in, and we are tuning it every once in a while to make sure that the changes in weather give you a different bass fishing rating. So what it does is it takes a GPS pin on where you are, it takes the past weather and the future weather to give you a rating from 1 to 10 on how the fish should be biting, what lures to throw, what locations to go to, and we've got videos, instructional videos made by me, yours truly, on how to fish every single lure category. It's all inside the app. And I gotta find the screenshot because there's a amazing amount of free stuff you get when you download Bass Forecast Premium. Let me find it. A 60-day membership to the Bass University, a $25 Omnia gift card, a $20 Tackle Warehouse gift card, and 30% off the entire Bass Forecast store, 20% off of Hobie Eyewear, 20% off of Mountain Ops, and 20% off of Grundens, with I'm sure more to come, which is a crazy good value. And I'm a co-owner of the company, so downloading Bass Forecast and using it not only will help you be more in tune to how the weather affects your bodies of water, but again, helps this channel continue to grow. I will link Bass Forecast down in the video description. Now, not talking about reaction baits anymore, let's move on to my second favorite category that honestly I catch more big fish out of, and that is my slow baits. And in that slow category, as you can see there, I really only throw 2 main ones during the month of March, and they are both flipping and pitching, if not short casting type soft plastics. And that is a 6-inch Strike King Ocho stick bait rigged Texas rig style, and a full-size Strike King Rage Bug, again, also rigged Texas rig style. And the hook and weight setup for these Texas rigs usually is a 1/4 ounce pegged tungsten weight at the heaviest and a 1/16 at the lightest, and then a 3/0 VMC heavy-duty redline wide gap hook for the Rage Bug, and a 4/0 size or a 4/0 VMC flipping hook on the Ocho. And the reasons why I choose one of these two are because I want a soft plastic that I can cast accurately. I can flip it and pitch it around. I can make good skips underneath boat docks, or kind of slide it up to a laydown, or kind of like inside of a bush.
I've got one. Oh gosh, that's a big one. That's a big one. That's a big one. That's a nice one. You know what, not huge, but biggest of the day for sure. Oh, it's been hours since I last got a bite. And that fish right there, folks, is exactly where he should be. Oh, that's awesome. Look at how thick that fish is, boys and girls.
And that's because fish during this time of the year will really just move around, and oftentimes I don't need to flip a punch rig or a heavy jig deep into the center of a brush pile, skip it way far underneath a boat dock, because the fish are not under there. They are moving around from shallow cover object to other shallow cover object, and they're just kind of suspending on the outside. And so I like the Ocho especially because it falls relatively fast. It has a ton of salt content in there, and the Rage Bug is just a good all-around craw, bluegill, bug looking thing that you can flip and pitch around shallow targets, like I talked about, shallow wood, especially on key transition areas. And this applies to both lakes and ponds. Don't hear transition areas as a pond angler and think I'm just talking about lakes. I'm talking about you guys as well. And I like both of these the most. Now, when it comes to April, I've got 2 soft plastics that I throw a little more than these, even though I'll still mix them in, and we'll talk about those next month. Now, if all you remember from this video is one thing, and that is the fish usually are moving fast, they're going from one target to the other, and therefore it's best to just fish the outsides of bushes, the outside of trees, the outside to maybe just inside of the docks. Take that tip with you, because you're gonna catch more fish, especially in the south, using that tip during the month of March. Now, I'm sure one lure that I need to be throwing more of, especially because it fits into that stealthy, kind of weightless soft plastic or slightly weighted soft plastic, is the swim jig. I don't know why I don't throw this more. My confidence is just not in it, but I'm trying to make 2025, the year I'm filming this, the year that I finally figure out the swim jig pattern here in Texas, because I know it's a way to catch some giant bass. Jigs just have a bulkier, bigger presence, and they get a larger than average size. And so the same areas I throw an Ocho or I throw a Rage Bug, maybe I should throw a swim jig first just to build my confidence in it. So that is the slow moving baits. Now let's talk about the slowest moving, and that is the finesse category. Now, for us in the South, finesse fishing, at least in my experience, really doesn't mean the traditional finesse category. I'm not talking about casting a drop shot out into the center of the pond. I'm talking about shallow water, especially stained to clear water, actually sight casting at fish. Now, don't hear me say sight casting and mean sight fishing, AKA bed fishing, fishing for spawning fish. I'm just talking about fish that are cruising in the pre-spawn. They are looking for 1 or 2 last meals before they find a mate to pair up and spawn with. And so a finesse tactic is really the only way to go about catching those. So sight casting a very light drop shot, like a 16th ounce drop shot weight with a small drop shot worm, or my favorite wacky worm that launched last year, the Mach stick. Casting a drop shot or a wacky worm far in front of a fish as it's cruising down the bank and allowing that fish to actually find the lure on its own. You are not bringing the lure in front of their face, because that can spook that fish. That's really the only way to actually sight cast a big one.
Oh, is that one? That's one. It's gotta be one. Come on now. He was, got him, yes sir. Oh my gosh, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. Ho 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 ho. Beautiful fish, yes sir. Ha ha ha. Sorry for the bad camera angle, but got ourselves a beautiful pre-spawn cruiser, wacky rig baby, brand new Mach stick.
But now is where I bring back in those of y'all north of Tennessee, because finesse fishing is still gonna have a huge play for y'all during the month of March. So sadly, shaking a minnow is still probably the best way to catch them for you guys. And so if you have access to forward-facing sonar, this is probably still the best lure. But can you catch them on a wacky worm? Yes. Can you catch them on a drop shot? Of course. It's just usually a little bit deeper. Maybe you go from a wacky to a Nico for you guys who live north of Tennessee. But make sure you are paying attention to the weather, checking bass forecasts, keeping those those buddy alerts, we call them, on, because as soon as you have a few good days of warm weather, you could have some fish, especially ones that were closer to the bank to begin with, to start sliding up, and then category 1 and category 2 become a little more applicable. But if you're sick and tired of fishing a minnow and a suspending jerkbait, have no fear, you will join the fun here in about a month. So that, folks, is going to do it. I didn't talk a whole lot about location or the fish patterns because, spoiler alert, I have a kind of a springtime, but really focusing on the spawn and post-spawn video coming out in masterclass, so stay tuned. It'll be dropping here on the channel very, very soon. We're gonna have a ton of really helpful information in that video. As always, my tackle is linked below, bass forecast is linked below. If you wanna watch my February lures video, if you're in like ultra cold conditions, maybe that video still applies to you, whammy, it'll be up here in the corner. And if you wanna see my entire 200 pond series, teaching you guys how to become better pond anglers, it'll be over here in this corner. My name's Tyler. As always, it's a pleasure, and we'll see y'all next time right here on TRF.